Hello everyone, welcome to the episode 3 of our Zoom Masterclass series. This time it's none other than the award-winning interior designer Sarah Sham from Isaji's Atelier. Isaji's Atelier was established in 2014 by Sarah, which is the interior designer arm of Isaji's, a 106-year-old company in Mumbai. She started Isaji's Atelier as an independent design practice founded on a legacy and ethos of Isaji's brand. Since the inception of 6 years, she has successfully completed 40 residential and commercial projects. She has also won the Best of House Award in 2018, 2019, and 2020. So in the last year, Isaji's Atelier won various awards including Top 10 Firms by India, by Elle Decor, the Women in Design Excellence Asia Award as Interior Designer of the Year, and Trends Magazine Award winner of Best Hospitality. So yeah, I'm looking for an engaging and fun Friday evening. So over to you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Komal. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with all of you guys today. And I encourage you guys to, Firdaus, stop it. Don't be disruptive in the comment section. I encourage all of you guys to please leave comments in the comment section. I always prefer things to be interactive and engaging. I hate if I feel like I'm talking to myself. There's also a reactions button there on the bottom that Komal has kindly made available for you guys to use. If there's anything that you guys like or appreciate, please do leave a reaction there so I know it's going in the right direction. Okay. So I'm gonna start with my presentation. I hope everyone can see my screen. Yes? Okay, great. So today's topic is about contracts. And now I understand that we are all interior designers, we are not lawyers, we are not accountants, we are not business people. And there's a reason why you become an interior designer because you're probably not good at being any of those other things. So what I feel like often happens is that the business side of things gets left out because you're so busy just doing the design work and being a really good designer that you forget about all these important things. There are many instances where I feel like, someone's taken advantage of my niceness. And I have now become very strict with my contracts just to avoid this ever happening to me ever again. I'm sure many of you will be in the same position. So I hope today's session is helpful for you. I'm putting in every clause that you need to know when you are preparing a designer's master contract. So I'm going to start with setting up the contract. I get a lot of questions from people that are always asking, will my client actually sign the contract? I tried to get him to sign. He said, no, he's not signing. He doesn't agree to this clause or she wants this different clause, blah, blah, blah. So I'm just laying the foundation. And of course, we have a question and answer session that'll come up in the end. The first point is that you always have to put it on stamp paper. This is because if there's any case where there is some kind of legal issue that happens later, it's not like you're actually going to file a lawsuit, but it's always better to have it on stamp paper. Stamp paper also looks very scary, so even if you print it on stamp paper, automatically makes it a lot more legitimate. This is something that I really encourage you guys to do. It really doesn't cost anything and it doesn't take any extra time. You're printing it anyway. Sorry, one second.
And can be just 100 rupees stamp paper, or is there a specific value? Because usually stamp papers depend on the value of the contract. You're on mute, Sarah.
I just do 100 rupees stamp paper. I don't bother with anything else beyond that. It's just there to scare the client into realizing that this is a legal document and that this has some legitimacy. The other thing is that my contract is a bit long, and as you see, this is actually broken up into 7 different sections. I hope all of you have a pen and a paper handy to be able to note down all of the different clauses and the things that I have written. So I don't actually email this contract out. I sit with my client on it and I go through all the clauses together because otherwise they start to get very overwhelmed by it. Again, make sure it's signed before any drawings are sent. Otherwise, people very much take advantage of you. Insist on a contract. I know I'm repeating myself, but a lot of you guys get a little bit scared if the if the client is like, oh, I don't want to sign a contract, this, that, and the other. And it's just, I cannot stress to you how important it is. And what I have done is I have one family lawyer who I've asked for help on this document. It's just basic clauses, and it just helps if there is some kind of legal help that comes to you. Once you're through with this presentation, if you have any friends in the industry, please feel free to ask them and just see if they want to clean it up or add anything else that's helpful. So first part, you are setting up your contract. So you have your stamp paper, and the first page is basically you lay the groundwork on all the terms and ideologies, all the terms and everything that's written. So you say agreement was made on XYZ date. You say you introduce the project, the designer, and the client. So you're saying this agreement is made between Isaji's Atelier with registered office address XYZ with GST registration number XYZ and client name Firdaus Variava residing at Rockside Apartments with PAN card number ABC. And then you also say that the client has agreed to carry out whether it's renovation, refurbishment, built from scratch for their work at, and you put in the entire address of the space measuring so many square feet. So basically this is your first introduction page, which lays the groundwork for what you're talking about in your contract. Part 2, scope of work and general terms. So I think the first important point that I talk about, and this is why I want to talk to my clients in person about the contract, I talk about how many revisions are included in my design fee. So I talk about the fact that there are only 3 revisions that are included in my design fee and no more than that. What I do is if they ask for further revisions, each revision is chargeable. Right, that I can do 1 revision, 2 revision, 3 revisions of my plan. If they ask for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, I will charge them for every extra revision. This is something you can very much put in to your contract. Another thing I put here is about your 3D renders versus views. For me, I include SketchUp views into my, sorry, 2 participants raised hands. I'll just get to the questions in a little bit at the end. I'll get to all the questions together. Okay. I think that may be an easier way to do this. I'll go through this. Just please note down your question. I promise I'll get to this. 3D renders versus views. In some cases, I do include 1 round of 3D renders. So I'm talking about your 3D Max or something equivalent of that. I do include SketchUp views, and I include 3 revisions of SketchUp views into my contract. If there are renders that need to be made, I do charge the clients extra for the renders. Please make sure this is included in your contract as well. Oi, what happened? There. The third point I put into my scope of work is about my contractor. I say that the client will enter into a separate arrangement with the contractor. I am a designer. I can recommend a certain contractor. I don't do turnkey contracting. It's not an in-house thing for me. So I write specifically that I am not the contractor. The contractor is not me. You will enter into a separate arrangement with the contractor and you will pay the contractor separately, completely. Again, this is really important. Tomorrow, if the client comes back to you and says, oh, he put this wrong nail, I'm responsible for making sure the work is done to a certain quality, but I'm not the contractor. The contractor is a separate agency and will be dealt with as such. And very importantly, you have to define the role and responsibility of you versus your contractor. Now, in some cases, designers do take full responsibility for everything the contractor is doing. Certain other people say, I will only provide the designs, the contractor is the contractor's responsibility. You have to think about how you want to structure this and what makes sense for you. I will tell you what I do. I say that I'm a designer and the contractor is a separate person. I am here for designing. I will make sure that the designs are done up onto a certain level and quality, and I will keep supervising the site. But the contractor is a separate agent, and I am very clear about that right from the beginning. This is very important also. Sorry, I keep saying it's very important because for me, I think so many clauses are very important. Specify all the drawings included in your scope. So I literally write into my contract, I am going to provide plan, furniture layout, measurement layout, civil layout, plumbing layout, electrical layout, switchboard looping layout, wall elevations, your toilet elevations, light fitting specifications, electrical looping, switchboard drawings. I mention all of this point by point by point by point, all the drawings that are included in my scope of work. The reason why this is important, tomorrow the client will say, oh, why haven't you given me, I don't know, bloody working drawing of how the brick joinery happens? And I'm like, I'm sorry, that was not part of my scope of work. So it's very important that you please specify all the drawings. It's okay if your contract becomes 10, 20, 30 pages. Specify all the drawings and go through this with your client. These are all the drawings I'm going to be giving you. These are all the views. So this is again laying the foundation for what the expectations are between you or your client, which is why again I'm saying it's so important for you to sign a contract, because all these expectations are clarified from day one. There's much less problems later on down the road. Again, you need to clarify your involvement in the execution phase in the contract itself. So I do a once a week site supervision, and I hire a site supervisor that comes in and does a check-in on the site, or the contractor has an inbuilt site supervisor that checks in with me. It's either one of the two. So you clarify your involvement, and I write this as a clause in my contract. I will do weekly site check-ins, and there will be a site supervisor that is assigned from the client side or from my side. That also you figure out at this point who's going to do what, and then you clarify this point with your client. This is based on how you work and how you would like to do things. And finally, timelines for project execution. So for me, we take about 2 to 3 months for the design process, right up until the BOQ and quotations phase. And then we ask for 6 to 8 months. This is super important. We put an end date to this. Say this contract is valid from 9th October 2020 to 9th October 2021. And there are clients that are like, oh, but what if the project runs over, or what if whatever happens? I'll tell you how to deal with that in a minute. Part number 3 is your professional fees for the project. So how much you're going to get paid for a project. So I'll say my fee for this project will be X. I also write, if the client fails to make the payment within a specified time, the designer can stop work up until the payment is made. This is really important. When I raise an invoice, I would like that invoice to be cleared within a week. If it's not cleared within a week, I'm going to stop my work. That is a problem. I'm not just going to be here to do free work for anyone. Please put this into your contract. Please ensure you have written that no government taxes are applicable, because otherwise, if you say your fee is whatever, 1 lakh or 2 lakhs, they'll say, oh, but we thought this was with GST. There are lots of very clever people that will try and squeeze you like this. Please don't get squeezed. Here we go. Fees should be paid within 1 week of raising the invoice. This is very important. I mentioned a payment schedule, what gets paid at what age. So you have your entire design process. Obviously, first you have your mood material charts, your AutoCAD plans and whatnot. So there is a certain payment that's tied to each one of those deliverables that you give, and you can decide how much you would like to get paid. Industry standard is that about 60 to 70% of the payment happens during design phase, and 30 to 40% happens during execution phase when you are a designer. If you are a PMC, it will be different. There will be a lot of payments that are linked to the execution phase. So this is something that you know from your work experience, and what type of payment schedule your clients are willing to do, and how usually Part 4 is project implementation. Okay, so this is my 4th part in my contract. So this is where I'm going to clarify this point about the validity of the contract and the end date. So I clarify with my clients that, and this is from my experience, there's only 2 reasons why a project is delayed. The first reason is the clients are taking too long to make a decision. The second reason is if the clients are taking long to make a payment on site. It is never my fault. I mean, almost never. Because for me, I want to finish off this project as quickly as is possible. It is in my interest to finish it as quickly as is possible. If I'm getting a fee of say 10 lakhs and I have accounted for 10 months work, but I finish the work 8 months, that's my advantage. That's not a disadvantage to me, right? That's my advantage that I've got 2 extra free months. So it is, I will always be pushing very hard to finish the project on time. So I very much put an end date. And if it extends beyond that end date, I have to get paid every month. I do a simple monthly retainer because I have an office. I have a lot of salaries. I can't afford to keep working on a project if it extends beyond a certain period of time. Now, which point do you like? A lot of people are very resistant to this concept of mentioning an end date. A lot of clients are resistant, so this is something that you do need to have a conversation about. All my clients have agreed to this and they do understand this. I talk to my clients now in the world of COVID about the concept of a pause. So there's a lot of building allocations for work. There's also a lot of situations in which, say, for example, I finished my design work, but the execution work is taking long because the client doesn't have money, they've gone out of town, there's some leakage in the house that needs to get resolved, etc., etc., etc. So what I do is I have the concept of a pause in my contract, and I literally say, if we would like to take a pause on the project by mutual consent, we can have that discussion and we can continue with the pause. So what a pause basically means that if, say, Firdaus is my client and he says, Sarah, listen, I don't want to do the work now. I want to do it in 2 months. I say, okay, we hit pause October 9th, November 9th, December 9th. I will do zero work. I'm not at your beck and call. You can't just keep calling me, say, give me this drawing, give me this thing, I'm on pause. So for those 2 months, I will not do any work because you have whatever issues you're having. And then when you like me to remove work, you tell the contract very gets adjusted based on that pause. You have to understand you are getting paid for your time. If a project is supposed to be 6 months, the project becomes 1 year, you are losing money. You have to explain that to your clients. And this is something you have to be really strict about. All permissions need to be from the client side. So I can't tell you how legally important this is. You should write all fire permission, all building permissions, all BMC permissions, all society NOC, any kind of legal permission are not your responsibility. And I'll tell you why. I don't know how many remember, but there was a fire that happened at Kamla Mills, okay, where there were some BMC rules that were flouted. Who got pulled up? The interior designer. The interior designer was almost taken to prison over this. Now, it is not the interior designer's responsibility to get the permissions. The owner of the property has to get all the permissions. So if there is a watertight contract like this in place, you can never be in that position. And actually, after the Kamla Mills fire that happened, that's when I contacted my lawyer immediately saying that tomorrow, if there is something that happens because the owner of the building has done something illegal, as the interior designer, I'm not going to go to prison. I don't want to get caught for anything. So you have to be careful. It's a very real thing that can happen because you don't know what's legal and what's illegal. So, if you're a licensing architect, it's different. But if you are an interior designer, this is not your cup of tea at all. This is piggybacking off the video that I just did, the IGTV. Mention my office hours and when they can contact you. I tell them in the contract that my office hours are Monday to Friday, 10 to 7. I tell them from day one, I will answer your call if you call me outside office hours. If it's something life or death urgent, you can message me and I will get back to you. I deem it to be urgent enough. I'm usually really nice about these things, but I mention very clearly what my office hours are, and I tell them not to call me outside of those office hours. I don't want to be disturbed. I also put a clause in talking about leave days and off days. Your clients should know that you do have a personal life, and if you want to take a leave day, you can. But what I do tell them is that I will give them 1 week notice, and I will not disappear anywhere without giving them 1 week notice, which I think is fair. Part 5, ownership of documents. This is something you need to discuss with your clients. A lot of builders maintain the copyright of all the designs. If they do, you should charge them more money because design copyright should remain with both you and the client under all circumstances. If they are wanting to take exclusive copyright, that means they this is a design of XYZ builder, whereas it is actually your design. So you have to be, the copyright remains with the designer and client, ideally remains with the designer because this is your design. But in most cases, you do that the copyright remains with the designer and the client. I get a lot of messages from people saying that, oh, ma'am, I finished this site. My client's not letting me photograph. What do I do? Clarify it in the beginning. It's your fault for not asking in the beginning. You have to clarify before you sign on. I'm going to take pictures of the site. If you don't let me take pictures of the site, again, you have to charge a premium because you can only get more work if you have work in your portfolio. And if they're not letting you take pictures of the site, that's going to be a problem for you to get further work. So there very much is something called, a non-disclosure agreement, which your client may make you sign if they don't want any pictures taken. And you can charge them a fee for signing the non-disclosure agreement. This is a very real thing that happens. Imagine if I'm doing a 10,000 square foot office. I've never done one before. My client doesn't allow me to take any photos. Tomorrow, another client approaches me for 10,000 square foot office. I have no photos to show. I have nothing in my portfolio. So that's a huge disadvantage to me, even though I've done the work. So you can very much charge someone for this, but please clarify you can take pictures of the site. When you are getting the work published, a lot of people are okay with it getting published. They never want their name, address, or to come in. Whereas some clients like Firdaus want their picture pasted everywhere. So please clarify from them from the beginning. If tomorrow I approach a publication, are you going to be okay? Because like say, for example, Casa Vogue, they want the clients to be there in the pictures with the designer. So I would like to clarify from the beginning what is okay and what is not okay. You have to decide as a firm whether you do as-built documentation. That means the project is completed. You go back into the project, you measure everything, and you take a full new set of or completed set of drawings based on what actually has happened by the time the project has ended. Some people require it, some people don't, but please understand, what as-built documentation is going to be provided. This is, some point that I covered. How much information are they okay disclosing when something is getting published? And if it's a commercial project, ask them if they're okay with people coming to see the project. Ask them at this stage. Don't ask them when the project is completed. Ask them at this stage, are you okay if I've completed my project? If someone wants to see past work, can I bring them in? I never let anyone see a residential project. I find it to be huge infringement of their privacy. I want someone trampling through my client's bedroom and bathroom saying, oh, what finish have you used here? And what is this bed sheet made of? And what material is this WC made from? I just find it awful. I don't want to spoil relations with my clients. So I do this for residential projects. But for commercial projects, I very much ask because, it's a public space. So most are okay with it, but ask them. Part 6 is safety, security, cleanliness, and travel. The watchman always has to be from the client side. It is their site, it is their property, they provide security, and that is something that is the client's responsibility. Please clarify this. The contractor needs to keep the space clean. I also put this as a clause in my contract that, the contractor's responsibility is to keep the space clear of debris, because what happens is that a lot of times there's a lot of debris that's there, and they don't get the tempos and a timely way to clean it up. And this causes problems for a lot of building societies. So this is another clause that this is a clause I've spoken about before. It's a clean bathroom clause for designers. I don't know how many of you guys have heard of this clause before. Basically, I'm on construction sites the whole day and I don't have a clean bathroom to use. And I have a team which is very woman dominated. And it's honestly really difficult to go to a site where you can't use the bathroom. So I do ask my clients in advance to provide a clean bathroom for me and my design team. I don't want to show up at site and be knocking on some neighbor's door or going to some random hotel on the road to use the bathroom. I want to be there comfortably. So they have to ask a neighbor, they have to figure it out from before the project starts and give me a clean bathroom to use. There are two ways for travel arrangements. Some people include it in their design fee, which I don't think makes any sense. Some people, pay for it and then they get reimbursed. And some people ask the clients to pay for it directly. So you just have to figure out what your arrangement is for travel and put that into your contract as well. This includes flight, hotel, food, and your airport pickup and drop off, and a car for your entire stay while you're there, because obviously you need transport. So all of this stuff, you need to just clarify who does what. And the final part is the termination of the contract. Under what conditions are you okay to end this contract? I always say it's by mutual consent. Both people have to consent to this contract ending. Up until that point, the payment has to be cleared for every single thing that's done on site for me and for the contractor. I also ask for a 15 days rectification period. So I write in the contract that, there will be a 15-day rectification period during which if the errors are not rectified up to a certain quality or standard, then automatically it's by mutual consent. So say if the client tells me that they're unhappy with something and they would like to terminate the contract, they have to allow me 15 days to rectify whatever that problem is. If after 15 days the client still feels like the problem is not going away, we can terminate the contract. So you determine how long you would like this to be: 15 days, 10 days, 30 days. That's something that you can discuss. Again, this is on stamp paper. It's very important to know whether if this goes to court, to 0.001, because this is a legal document and is a question. Are you going to go to the court? Do you like to put in where you would like it? To me, arbitration is, but I mean, it's a very expensive test. Some people prefer small causes court. You can check on what you feel comfortable. I was asking me, can you elaborate 15 days notice for termination of contract? Um, so the 15 days notice is basically, say if there's something that's really going wrong on site and the client is really unhappy with you. What we encourage our clients to do is obviously have an open conversation. We're not some like ogres or horrible monsters that they can't call us and talk to us. So they tell us, listen, I don't think I want to have you on board anymore because of XYZ reason. The point of the 15 days is we only ask, give me 15 days, I will fix this problem. If I don't fix this problem in 15 days, you can go your own ways and this contract is done. No worries, but allow me a chance to fix whatever the problem is. So that's what the 15 days notice is. Should there be a different contract between designer and contractor? No, there should be one between the client and the contractor, and that's up to the contractor how he would like to structure his, contract, his payment terms. That's something that you can very much, facilitate. Rishabh is asking how many pauses? One, only one pause. You can't just keep pausing, every once in a while. Now take 10 days, now take 2 days, now take 5 days, now take 1 month. Um, Most clients don't know which drawings are needed for the execution, so they may not be okay with mentioning drawings in the contract. I don't agree with this at all, Stuti. They'll know what drawings are required, so you should mention it in the contract. You're just clarifying expectations for everything. So Rishita says, how do you deal with changes in site conditions in case there's a massive leakage that shows up post breaking the space? So this is a very, very good question, actually, Rishita. This happens in many cases. So there's two things that you would do. One is I would ask a structural engineer to, I would recommend some people. And the second thing I would do is I would take a pause. I would say, this is structural work. There's a leakage that's happening, that's coming through the slab or through the duct. This is something that needs to get rectified. You rectify this, you get back to me when it's rectified, and we will continue with the interior works as planned. So I mean, that's just the easiest way of doing it. Can a similar contract be drawn out for an architectural and interior project combined? Yes, absolutely, very much so. Ankita says, should we charge extra for site visits? No, I don't charge extra for site visits. It's your site. You should do it with every kind of passion and enthusiasm. If a client feels like you're charging for site visits, that's going to make them feel like, only if I pay her will she come and check in on the project. I suggest you charge a design fee that includes enough site visits where you feel like your time has been paid for and that your time is valued enough. When talking about revisions, how elaborate are they? I mean, a revision is something where they make you do an entire rework of something, and small on-site changes are not counted as revisions because I may also make them. So yeah. So how do you tackle a situation where a client asks for a discount when you finish the project earlier? I ask for a bonus, not a discount. Are you joking? I should get a bonus for finishing the site earlier. Discount, that's, please tell him that he's got to be joking. There's just no way. And tell this client to go take a hike because there's no way I should get a bonus for finishing it earlier. Who should pay for the photography and videography, the client or the designer? Question. So if the client is going to be using the pictures, they have to pay for it, or you can split it with the client if you're nice. But yeah, you need to very much have that discussion. You should definitely be part of the payment because you have to get the pictures based on how you like doing it, what kinds of pictures you like, how you want to do it. So like say I'm doing a restaurant project, we'll split it, or I'll get them to pay for it because they are going to use it on Zomato for all their marketing, for everything of the sort. What if we're helping the client with sourcing and market visits? Do we put a time on that? We actually get all the samples and show it to them. We don't go roaming around in the markets because that wastes a lot of time. That's not the right way of doing it because clients themselves get confused as well. Let's see some more. What if the project is going on and I want to redo a contract? No way. No way, Ria. You have to do this from the beginning. Why will you want to redo a contract half the way? So Amrita is asking, what about bringing in architects and structural engineers to check on your demolition or new structure safety specification? Is that done through the client, or are you supposed to bring them in? What a brilliant question, Amrita. That is the client's responsibility. Fantastic question. Unless you are a structural engineer, it is not your responsibility, or unless you are an architect where this is part of your scope of work. So that's why this comes back into like the scope of work, topic. Okay, so percentage of fee advance should be asked before designing. So usually it's 10% as your signing fee. And then after that, every drawing that you give, it's either 5% or 10% of whatever your total fee is. And by the time you reach the BOQ phase, where you've given all your costing, at least 60 to 70% of your design fee should have already been paid off by this point. Let's see. Fidu, would you be able to help me with some of these questions? I'm kind of struggling to go through them.
There's a lot of questions.
I know this, like
through all of them.
But
a lot of them I think are on the same topic. Like, what do you charge for in terms of like site visits, visiting to the market to look for materials and things like that? I don't think those are chargeable. Like, that's part of your design fee, like going to the market, selecting materials, things like that. So that's one thing. And then somebody's asking about, like, what if something gets spoiled on site due to water leakage and things like that? So what happens there?
So there's something called a defect liability period. It's called a DLP. Okay, this is something that the client has to deal with the contractor. So your defects liability period is something that is discussed with the contractor when the work is starting and when the contractor is signed on board. So in that, you discuss with your contractor that, okay, if a hinge gets spoiled, the contractor will come. But if there is a massive leakage that's come from outside, that's not the contractor's thing to rectify. You have to get that rectified, So the point is that a lot of you guys, me included, the problem is not having the conversations before. Once everything is clear, then they know, because once the problem happens, they'll say, oh, but I expected you to do this. And you'll say, no, this is not my job. And then that's what leads to a fight. So that's the whole point. If you feel like you've had an experience where it was not clear, then just add that into your contract. So like for me, that was like the clean bathrooms clause. I found it to be a very awkward conversation, so I added it in.
So clients, this is a really good one. Clients are generally dabbling between consulting different architects. Once they finalize us as a service provider, how do we go about receiving an advance before design commencement?
You just
so actually getting them to pay up.
I mean, if they don't pay, don't give them the work, right? It has to be like you give the work and you get the payment a simultaneous kind of thing. And if they're not paying you, then you just have to tell them to get out, or you just stop giving them the service. A lot of people are scared of confronting their clients, so they just continue providing a service without having a chat, which is another part of the issue. Guys, I hope there's a recording for this, because
Yeah, yeah.
alternate question is there a recording? Is there
Yes, 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 yes.
please
Guys,
give
there will be a recording and we will be putting it up on Facebook and YouTube and
okay.
whatnot. So you guys can see it later.
Okay, do you have to include the BOQ with the contract? If it's totally signed off on, that would be so helpful. Yes, absolutely. That's something that you can do. Um, so when it comes to the drawings, also what we do is we actually print out the set of drawings and ask the clients to sign off on the drawings, and then we go into the construction phase, so that everything is totally approved from the client side. I really recommend that you guys do that as well. Does the decor of the space be included in our scope? I include it. I think a house is not completed without decor. So, I mean, that's something that I include as well. Let's see. If we do any questions that come up for you?
I don't know. Somebody keeps asking about this one. Someone has posted the same question about 4 or 5 times. So, one second. Uh, how about the work done before rectification period, like the design copyrights? I don't understand this question at all. I'm assuming that it means that
Even I don't understand
I
this
don't
question.
understand this question. Preksha, I'm sorry, we don't understand this question. How do you handle situation?
Guys, this is not a talk about BOQ. I will do another on BOQ. Just, I promise you it will be there. But this is about contracting, okay?
A lot of people have asked about the delay, like supposing the project goes over a period of time. Like how do you talk have a conversation with the client about that? Because that's obviously something like, first of all, how do you estimate the amount of time, and then how do you deal with the client if it goes over that period of time?
Say that again, Firdaus.
Sorry.
Say that again.
So the question is that how do you first of all estimate how long a project should take, and then how do you have a conversation with the client if the project goes over that date? Like,
You have a PERT chart that's created, which has all of the timelines and everything there on it. And if it does extend, you need to tell them at every point why it's extending or what the reason is for the extension. So I mean, that's just how it is. And like I said, the reasons for delay are usually from the client side and not from the designer side. It's not like once my drawing phase is over, that's pretty much the bulk of my work is done. So it's not from it's either the contractor or the client that's causing an issue. um
so feel then there's a question about, basically, a couple of people have asked the same question about freelancers. Like, supposing you're a freelancer without a design firm, do you still make a contract?
I'm a
And
freelancer. What am I? I'm not from some big company. I'm a freelancer. I very much make my contracts. I've made them from the beginning. So this is, I mean, obviously you have to
right,
your contracts. Can
then
design and execution phase go hand in hand? Oh my God, no, absolutely not. Please stay
yeah,
away from this. You should complete all your designs and only then move into.
correct.
A lot of people are asking about cash payments. I think the key is to stay away from them. We're living in a demonetization kind of world. I really can't speak to the cash topic. And a lot of people Vaibhav is asking, what if one's starting off and doesn't have a GST number? I mean, that's okay. That's your choice. You should apply for one. It hardly takes a couple of days to apply for one. So I just don't see why you would not, because at some point, if a larger company wants to hire you for a project, you will have to have a GST number because they get an offset. They won't hire people without a GST number. So if it takes, so little time to do, why wouldn't you just do it?
Correct. And for the cash component, I would say that regardless of whether you're taking your fees in cash or you're taking it in check, the whole purpose of this contract is not really so that you go to court. The whole purpose of a contract is that so that you're clear with your client what the understanding is. Most contracts are not written with the aim of going to court. You're just basically making it clear. Look, this is what's been agreed between the two of us. This is the scope of work. These are the fees. Whether you
Agreed.
take your fees in cash or you take it in gold coins or whatever. At the end of the day, it's just an understanding that you have with your client. Write it down somewhere so there's no confusion later. That's the main thing.
Okay, so Akshay is saying, and I know this is a common problem, many clients want designers, contractors to do the site work. And then if a mistake happens, the client blames the designer because the designer has referred the contractor. How should we deal with it? I actually, from the first meeting I have with my clients, say that all contractors are awful. I just get along better with a few of them, which I will recommend to the project. But I start out by saying these are not my contractors. I don't know them. I mean, they're not like my brother, my cousin, my own firm, blah, 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 blah. We will deal with them as contractors, but these are just better guys. You and me have to both be comfortable with the contractor that we're hiring. So you have to make it clear from the beginning and reiterate this point many times so that in the end, if there's any issues, they shouldn't be pointing fingers at you, saying your contractor, your fault. Because a lot of times it's their contractor and there's still errors on site.
Also, I think it's important for the client to understand that you are a neutral party between the contractor, the vendors, the suppliers. And someone asked a question about, when you get quotations for various materials and for various services, do you straight away just pass it on to the client, or do you put a percentage of that, do chadao something on that and then pass it to the client? So I would say that if you do this thing of chadawing things and taking a cut here and there, then your position of neutrality will no longer be valid. People will not consider you to be a valid neutral party, which can lead to more problems for you. So it's better to just be neutral and say, look, I'm not getting anything. I'm here to do my job, and I'm like between you and the contractor and whoever else is there.
Why don't we have a few people raise their hands if their question has not been answered yet and let them come on to the webinar and we can unmute them and have them be a part of this. So if you have
There's another important question I think that Navya asked is that how do you manage the last 10% payment? So that's, I think, a really interesting one.
So I only leave 5% for like the end. And literally like I'm very particular to follow up on the snagging and the completion because often what happens with me, and I've noticed this in the past, I've just like when the project is handed over, it's like, oh yeah, happy, happy, smile, smile. But then I don't actually raise that last invoice in time. So I have become very kind of particular that as soon as it's over, I make sure I go and meet the client a few times. Is this an issue? Is this an issue? Is okay, solve. Call the contractor, solve all of this, and then I'll immediately be like, okay, everything is cleared. I want my invoice. And if they say, oh no, not now in 1 week, I raise the invoice, I send it to them, and then I'll just keep sending them reminders. So don't just let it slide and then like 2 months later being like, oh hi, my fees actually were not cleared. Like don't do it that way. That last payment is difficult to get out of them. So you have to be a little bit more aggressive with that. If anyone wants to raise their hands, please.
Someone has asked a good question about basically when designers are starting off, usually their projects are from their friends or relatives. So how do you raise the topic of fees and contracts and things like that with them?
I definitely have the same exact discussion with them. One second. I'm asking Kitika to unmute because she's raised her hand.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you for this wonderful session. Actually,
Okay.
the one thing I want to ask, I'm just starting my career now. I'm a junior architect. So, like people like us, how do you tell like when to issue drawings accordingly? Should we mention that in the contract, or how do we go about issuing the drawings?
So I do mention that in the contract, saying that first you're going to get your mood board, material chart, and CAD drawings in phase 1, and then in phase 2, it is like you'll get all of your views or your other technical drawings, etc., and the renders and whatnot. So I mention all of that very much within the contract. That's
Oh,
something.
okay. Thank you.
So there's been a really good question that, when people are starting out in the beginning, clients try to pressure them into giving them, mood boards and presentations and do a lot of design before they actually sign the contract. So how do you deal with that?
So 2 questions. I didn't answer the friends and family one properly, I think. So friends and family, I actually stay away from very close family. The only people I've done a home for was my parents, and we fought tooth and nail on that one. So I mean, that was really like quite the experience for me. But like first cousins, aunts, uncles, they've all asked me. I just say no because I feel like even my best friend, my Rakhi brother, asked me, and I said no because I am a very different person as a friend, and I'm a very different person as a professional. And I know Firdaus will vouch for that. In my workspace, I'm very kind of, this is the job, this is the work, here is your deliverable, and this is how much time it's going to take. So people may not like that kind of style of dealing with me, or there are always issues that crop up in the process. So I don't want to have those issues with someone that's a friend. So I really stay away from any kind of relatives or friends. But if you are going to do it, please do exactly this same process. You don't need to sign the contract, but go with a list of all the things that you're going to do and not going to do, and clarify all of them, being like, hi, uncle, auntie, cousin, this is all the stuff I'm going to do. This is all the stuff I'm not going to do. And these are the times at which I would need to get paid if you're charging even a basic fee. So just don't be afraid to have that conversation. And the other thing is about, people taking advantage of younger designers that and making them submit all these kinds of drawings before they get signed on. I hate this system. It's awful. And trust me, even as someone that is a medium designer, I also get asked to do this. Now I just have the sense to say no because I know people are just shopping around for free ideas, and I'm not interested in doing that unless it's something really lucrative or I feel like the client is trustworthy. But I have a few pointers for this. So Firdaus is correct. Don't do anything for free, like ever. Really, please don't. So what I do is I will put together the presentation and I will only show it to them in person, or I will do a screen share and I will keep the presentation with me. I will never email them the presentation or give it to them or give them any prints of anything ever. And I'll just kind of give them enough of a teaser where they want to see more. But there are a lot of people that will give a full costing plan, elevation, views, everything just email to the client. So if you're going to be silly enough to do that, then of course someone's going to take advantage of you, right? So you have to be a little bit cleverer than that.
So the thing is that I think there's a lot of people who get this, who get into the syndrome that they really want the project badly, and then they end up giving the client a lot, like in the hopes that the client will be convinced. But my take to you is that usually what happens is that the client has already kind of like made up their mind about whether they want to work with you or not. And the more you give them, in fact, it's detrimental to you. Like sometimes just the fact that they've kind of made up their mind, now you just need to push them into actually signing the contract or paying you the money. If you give them free stuff, then they're like, yeah, she's desperate, why not?
So Ankita,
I'll totally go ahead with them.
very good question. Ankita saying in most projects, clients will do the accessorizing and furnishing later due to budget. We actually put this into our BOQ. We put accessories, furnishings, even put bed covers, an amount for bed covers, cushions, all of that we put when we're preparing a full BOQ. We put all of that into that so that right from the beginning, the clients know what this is going to be, and later they don't, try and wiggle out of it because the house is not completed unless all that stuff is done. Um, so client want an estimate, I just give them a thumb rule estimate saying it'll be 5,000 a square foot if you use so and so materials. It'll be 7,000 a square foot if you use, whatever, some basic marbles. It'll be 10,000 if you use Italian marbles and imported fittings, etc., etc. I don't do full costing.
Then there's a really good one, which is about basically how do you limit your liability in case you've made some wrong drawings or like screwed up technically somewhere. So how does one limit one's liability in such cases?
So in that case, you really just have to accept your error and just, severely apologize. And if there is an error that's happened that's costed the client a significant amount of money, you'll have to have a conversation with your client and see how best to do that. Or if you have a good rapport with your contractor and he can kind of, find a creative solution for that error, that would be the way forward for that.
This is another good one. I think you faced the same situation that cross client who was unsure of his space and made a lot of changes and a lot of layout changes. And so how many layout changes do you make for a client? I think Sarah recently had one client who did this to them.
I recently had a client just now, a couple of months ago, where we did, we did the revisions 1, 2, and 3, and even after that, he was just like every time we got onto a call, they were coming with like a new design idea, a new thing. Like, no, now I want this. Now I want this. Then they went to Alibag. They saw something. They're like, no, now I want this, and I was just getting really fried. So I was actually on the verge of breaking up with the client when someone from my team, Nikhil from my team, said that. Let me just do a 3D view, move into 3D, and then maybe they'll understand the space better. So without freezing on any of these references that we were showing them, we did only 3 mood boards, and then we went to 3D, and they actually understood the 3Ds much better. We made the decision that if they don't understand from the 3Ds, then we'll walk away from the project. But continuing to give them again and again and again and again and again was just becoming a very slippery slope.
So
Any other?
here's another one about someone is asking about how do you estimate the cost. So you're saying basically just take it as a per square foot cost.
Yeah.
Take it as a per square foot cost for this kind of thing and say that, look, I mean, it's generally going to be 3,000, 5,000, 8,000, whatever. I think that's how I've been dealt with as far as I've been, when I've dealt with interior designers for my projects, I usually get like a per square foot cost. And then you have a benchmark based on that.
So for the stylist, a couple of questions. Amrita and Falak are asking about the stylist. So the stylist charges whatever the stylist charges for the space. And then after that, if the client likes any of the accessories that have been put in, they very much have the right to buy any of that stuff and speak to the stylist about it. Sometimes I bring my own styling materials. Literally, I pick up all the plants and the photo frames and everything from my house. I put it there for the pictures and I take it back. In cases where there's really like a bare shell for the space, and then other spaces we hire a stylist if required.
So someone has asked about basically that clients always have their budgets and want more in that budget.
You have to set the expectations from the beginning of what is possible.
Yeah, I
because
think that's a very valid point.
There are a lot of memes, right? Like, that the client budget will be like the Titanic, but like the reality is like one dinghy boat with like a fishing rod attached to it. So
Yeah.
if you're giving them dreams of the Titanic by showing them Pinterest reference images of this amazing space, the reality is that they can only afford Nitco tiles and Jaguar fittings, then they're not going to be so happy with the outcome. So you have to adjust the expectations right from the beginning.
Yeah.
So is it okay if another designer works on our project done by us because the contract is over in the middle? Yeah, it's fair. I mean, the space has to get ready some way or another, right? So if one designer has left a project halfway through, whether they've got fired or they mutually left or whatever it is, someone has to come in and complete the work, whether it's you or whether it's someone else. You just have to see if the projects and the clients suit you. And there is a question raised as to why the previous designer was fired or why it didn't work out. As long as you're satisfied with that answer, you should very much go ahead with those clients. I'll take the last couple of questions. Let's have someone. Priyanka has raised her hand. I'm gonna ask Priyanka to come on. Priyanka, ask to unmute.
Hi, Sarah
Hi,
ma'am.
how are you?
Hi, I'm good. I'm a huge fan of your work.
Thanks.
I actually wanted to know whether you have a team of your own, like your own carpenters, plumbers, electricians, and whatever. Um, so if no, how do you ensure the quality that is executed
Yeah,
on the site? Like,
I do have my own team. I work with multiple contractors, but now so earlier I used to be open to working with any contractor that my client recommended, but now I have become very particular. I will only work with the contractors that I've worked with before that I can vouch. Yeah, Firdaus, this is what I was talking about. So now
So
I'm
yeah, always remember this, guys.
expectations. Um, I've become very particular that I'll only work with the contractor I've worked with in the past because I know the type of quality that they're doing and I know that that is up to a standard. So then I'm not feeling insecure that, tomorrow some other contractor comes, he's saying marine ply, he's putting commercial ply, he's saying, expensive veneer, he's putting some horrible, veneer that's chipping off from everywhere because I can't sit and break my head over that. for all this stuff, the whole project and the timelines go for a toss. So that's just how I do it.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. Nikita, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Nikita,
Nikita, how are you?
I'm good, dear. I'm very a big fan of yours, and I really follow all your attitude. I just want to ask one thing, of the station, like they contact you from social media, and if they want any designs, right? So how do you deal in that case? How do you finalize the plan and all?
Sorry, how do I finalize?
What if you're saying that what if they come on social media, find stuff, and then like tell you to design it according to that?
Nikita, I didn't understand the question. I've asked you to unmute.
Yeah, sorry. I'm asking you, like somebody is asking you on the all things from you. How to conclude that plan, because we are far away from each other, right? So if they want some plans, yeah, if they want some plans regarding the details and also how to deal in that case, dear.
That's a really good question, Nikita. So what we basically do is right now, even in a pre-COVID world, we actually completed all of our design in a digital way. So the first thing is we have the clients have a surveyor come in and measure the apartment. Okay, so they have to send us. I'm not coming there and sitting with a bloody measure tape and measuring all of that stuff. Those days are gone. It doesn't cost much to have a surveyor come in. And those measurements are more accurate than us standing with the tape and measuring because they have specific measurement tools. So we have a surveyor come in, and along with that, we also do a Zoom or a WhatsApp video walkthrough with me and my entire team of the full space so that we understand the space. And then all of the design phases and the drawings and the payments works exactly in the same way. They give me 10% when they've signed. They give me 5 and 10% at every, proper interval. And then before we go into execution, we do one site visit where we do the line out marking on site. We meet with the clients, we meet with the contractors that are finalized, and then we go ahead. So this is how we deal with outstation projects, and we will make that flight or that trip for that one line out marking meeting. But that first 2-3 months, we completely do everything digitally, and it works perfectly fine. That's how firms in Singapore, Hong Kong, Dubai have been working for donkeys years, doing some of the world's biggest airport projects, hotel projects, all of that. So how come we are not able to work like that? How is it possible that only in India we have to go to site every day? I have to meet the client every day. I have to sit on the contractor's head every day. This is not how we're supposed to be working. We're designers, we're not site supervisors, we're not contractors. And if you start behaving like one, then they'll think of you as one. So you have to draw that limit and you have to say, I'm sorry, this is not my responsibility. I'm a designer and I'm not going to be doing this. So you draw that line in the sand, and that's why this contract is so important. You tell them from the beginning, I'm not going to show up every single day to your site to check that one nail has gone 3 mm off. This is not my responsibility. I will come every week. I'll make sure a competent contractor is there on the job. And then I will make sure that the project is handed over, but I'm not going to be there all the time to handhold the contractor. Contractor is so dumb, we shouldn't be hiring him in the first place. Drishti, I'm unmuting you.
Hi, Sarah ma'am.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for all the knowledge that you've shared with us.
Most welcome. My pleasure.
I have a question. I'm a young designer who's just started out. I want to know how to contact a client without being pushy who has halted the project after signing on the BOQ design and contract for more than 6 months due to COVID and is not giving me a resume date.
Okay. So in this situation, I think honestly, you just have to write an email, write a message, and let it sit, because the client obviously must be going through something. Everyone is going through something in COVID. We all have our own problems. Actually has COVID. So, it's not easy. A lot of people's cash flows have been really severely affected. I would honestly not pester. I would just do one or two follow-ups, and I would start looking for alternate jobs, alternate work, and putting word out there, which I know is easier said than done because nobody's really, hiring that aggressively in COVID. But Drishti, I would not scare away my client by constantly pestering him or her, knowing that they may not be ready to resume work. Just
But I think at least to get some estimation from the client would be good, so that you can say, look, I'm taking on another project.
Ignoring her, then what is she supposed to do, right? She can't just keep asking him again and again.
No, as in if you say like, okay, you think you'll be ready after 6 months, then I can at least take on another project kind of thing. So that is kind of like becomes clear. Or the client may say, no, next month I'm getting a big payment, we'll start again. So at least you know that maybe I shouldn't.
Drishti, I'm assuming you've asked once, right? And then you've not heard
Yeah,
back.
I did. So the client was himself unsure as to when he would like to resume. I haven't asked the second time because I'm finding it too pushy from my end, considering the COVID.
When did you ask last?
It was 3 months ago.
Ask him again. 3 months is enough time. And ask him in a way saying like, hi, whatever. I would just like to know, because I'm trying to plan my own workflows and plan on when I'm taking on additional work. If there is any work happening in the near future, I'll make sure to keep my time free. If not, please let me know. So then he'll respectfully let you know, because you also have to plan your life and your work. You can't just sit around waiting for this guy to call you.
Now here's a good question. What do you do
Yeah.
if there's a something on site which the client doesn't like after you've installed it? So you agreed on something, now you got it to the site, you've installed it, blah blah blah, and now the client is, I don't like it. Now what do you do?
Too bad. I mean, honestly, too bad. If they want to pay for getting it changed, fine. But I mean, if they've signed off on it, then too bad, really. You've already, if you want to pay to get this whole thing redone, then your call as a client. If you don't like it, because this is what we've agreed on. As a designer, I think this is what looked good. So it's your call. You want to pay again and redo the whole thing, tear the whole thing to shreds and redo it and pay all the money again, go for it. Totally your call. Okay, guys, we'll take
I
one
think we should end it. This can be the last question.
last question. Last one, I'll do a quick one. If unfortunately the contract ends midway, how do the fees work? So up until that point, say if you've provided, whatever, more than half of your documents, in your contract where it says the design fees part, how much you're supposed to get paid, up until that point, how much you're supposed to get paid, you have to make sure you get paid that amount, and then it gets the rest of the payments, obviously you don't get, and the contract is terminated.